Hello, listeners. Happy New Year. I hope you enjoyed the holidays and 2023 is off to an amazing start for all of you. This is our first post of the year, which is exciting because it's a little bit different from our regularly scheduled readings. We will continue our readings, but are also open to requests about other topics that people are interested in despite a lack of reading material on it. One highly requested topic we've been asked to cover and enthusiastically accept is the topic of pseudoscience. We actually have a dedicated playlist on our channel about pseudoscience, with recordings on the research and details of what it is, and its effects on behavior. Today, we thought it would be a fun exercise to find a real, current example of pseudoscience and break it down together. If you haven't watched our video on the key determinants of pseudoscience, I recommend you check them out. But for the sake of this video, let's go through a quick primer. A pseudoscientific claim involves multiple parts. 1. Extraordinary claims. It sounds too good to be true, like you must be a very special person because someone read it in your palm. 2. Over-relies on anecdotes. Everyone and their mother can attest that this placebo will cure your migraines. 3. Absence of connectivity to other research. If you were to go on Google Scholar, no other researchers have ever touched this subject because it's so obscure. And if they have, some similar papers would have evidence to refute the claims made. Which leads us to number 4, lack of peer review, where, again, no scientists have retested this claim under the same conditions, and if they did, their results disprove the claim. 5. Lack of self-correction. When scientists find errors or refute the claims made, the new data is ignored, overlooked, and not corrected by the ones making that claim. 6. Meaningless psychobabble. A bunch of flowery, confusing jargon is used to distract the person from questioning the claim. It makes the one making that claim seem reliable and smart, but none of what they're saying actually makes any sense. With these 6 key determinants in mind, it makes it easier for people to consider whether what they're hearing is pseudoscience or based in scientific fact. All 6 of these determinants use convincing appeals to make people believe in the claims. So let's use a real current example of pseudoscience. Have you ever heard of the term empath? Maybe you've heard somebody refer to themselves as an empath on social media. Or maybe you saw on Facebook there's a quiz to tell you what kind of empath you are. I've heard of this term a lot recently because it's a new pop psychology term used in books and self-help material that really never showed itself in the scientific literature I was reading as a student when I first heard that term from someone I knew. So I whipped out the old Google machine and tried to make sense of where this term came from, what it means, and whether it holds any merit at all in the sphere of science. Firstly, the definition of an empath in the Oxford Languages will shock you. It reads, chiefly in science fiction, a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. I'm going to read that again so it stays fresh in our mind while we go through this exercise. Chiefly in science fiction, a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. So you might be asking now, well, there must be another definition of empath that relates to science in a legitimate English dictionary, right? And the unfortunate answer is no, there is not. This is all we're getting. You will find differing definitions of empath in blogs, self-help books, TikToks, and other social medias, where it relates to a more scientific definition of empath, but these are inaccurate misnomers that relate more to the scientific term empathy and not empath. We will return to the difference between empathy and empath shortly. First, let's figure out why the word empath is tied to science fiction, because that stood out to me. Through some searching, the true origin of the term empath arose in 1956 when the Scottish author J.T. Mackintosh published his book titled The Empath. This is the very first publication of the empath, and it lives in the genre of science fiction, which means it is completely fictional, or more accurately, it draws on seemingly scientific concepts, but for the sole purpose of writing exciting stories that fall way beyond the boundaries of true science. And if that's not dismantling enough, the concept of the empath made another appearance in the science fiction TV show Star Trek, Season 3, Episode 12, which aired 12 years later in 1968. In the Star Trek episode, the character Jem proves she's an empath by absorbing Kirk's injuries, taking them on herself, and then healing them. In the original book, the empaths are described as alien beings who can use telepathic empathy with others. They simply know what others are feeling through telepathy. So now we know that the term empath holds the same authority as telepathy, Vulcans, and Klingons, all of which are made-up terms and stories that have no connection to real life. So why did this term explode in pop psych, and why do people refer to themselves as empaths if the term is not real or verifiable? One potential reason is the same reason many other pseudoscientific claims are made successfully convincing. It appeals to authority, and it is a large lie mixed with a little bit of truth. Let's expand on this. You probably know what empathy is, but if you don't, that's okay. It is simply the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. That is, the capacity to place oneself in another's position. It involves theory of mind, or knowing that your mind is separate from other minds. It is a documented scientific phenomenon that has neuroscientific basis. Empathy has been linked to neural structures like mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are these remarkable brain cells that fire when an animal does an action and when it sees another animal do that same action. People who have highly busy mirror neuron systems tend to score higher on empathy tests. We can understand why that is. Let's say if someone with a busy mirror neuron system sees somebody hunched over, their face crumpled up into a distressful expression, with tears falling from their face. The brain of the person seeing this will activate the same brain cells that fire when the person themselves is crying and distressed. So our empathetic individual can understand, oh, that person is sad, and I remember when I was sad, how it felt. This is basic empathy. A lack of empathy would cause a person to be unable to feel what others are feeling from their emotional expression, and that may be due to the person's inability to process emotions, or a very underactive mirror neuron system. The point is that the term empathy holds scientific merit. We can link neural structures and processes to the process of identifying and feeling other people's emotional expressions. We can test a person's level of empathy and scale it. Some people can have high empathy and some can have low. Others can be somewhere in the middle. Empathy can increase as a function of time and experience, and there are scientific studies that assess whether music can develop a person's empathy. We know that empathy is a scale. It describes a process. And in the sphere of science, we are acutely aware that we require rigorous testing to keep learning about this concept. We do not make any claims that cannot be disproven. The sci-fi term empath, however, describes an identity, and that is in part why it got so popular. You either are an empath or you aren't. Either you're in the group or you're out, and it's bad to not be an empath. The term empath carries with it social benefits and moral valence. Everyone wants to be good, and being an empath is good. But this is a short-sighted claim that cannot be falsified or replicated. No one can take a test and find out if they are an empath. Most empaths are self-identifying and base their judgment of themselves on anecdotes and the purely biased desire to be good. Unfortunately, the term empath is pseudoscience. It makes a broad claim that there exists two groups of people, empaths and non-empaths. It originates from unfalsifiable premises such as telepathy and the world of Star Trek, and it rests purely on personal anecdotes. It has no history in scientific literature, and scientists who study empathy do not use the term empath in their studies. They don't label their participants as empaths, and they do not claim that high empathy gives a person the ability to read another person's mind. Finally, in social media, where the term empath is documented and elaborated on, people make wild claims all the time that empaths can read your mind, they can tell when you're lying, and that they never make mistakes when it comes to understanding how others feel. These are not only untrue claims, but they are fantasies that encourage antisocial beliefs. If you call yourself an empath, you are prone to having the overconfidence bias. Overconfidence bias is the tendency for a person to overestimate their abilities. It may lead a person to think that they're better than average or an expert in a situation. Overconfidence bias may lead people to make risky choices, which can affect their social affinity and community relations. But it is beneficial to consider how much empathy you are capable of, and when to express your empathy in situations that will benefit others and yourself. Knowing the difference between the bunk term empath and the scientific phenomenon of empathy will empower you to think and act on sound knowledge. This concludes our exercise on pseudoscience. We not only learned about the key determinants of pseudoscience, but we went back and learned about the origin of the term empath. We also learned about empathy and mirror neurons and biases, like the overconfidence bias. This exercise not only shows us how to identify pseudoscientific claims, but it also serves as an example of when you do search for credibility in a situation, you learn a lot more than if you didn't. So, have you heard of any pseudoscientific sounding claims in your everyday life? If you have any examples, leave a comment down below, and let us know what you thought about this video. If you'd like to keep supporting Right Here Audio with our mission to increase accessibility in the educational spheres for people with reading impairments, like this video, subscribe, and let us know what you want to hear next. Thank you so much for listening. Let's keep learning through narration, and we can't wait to read 1 million more books together in 2023.